Welcome to this edition of Free Speak, a podcast of the Namibia Media Trust, and I'm Gwen Lister. The fish rot files, or fish rot, it's a phrase already familiar to a lot of people, not only in Namibia, but also further afield. It's the result of a collaborative journalism, investigative story between a number of different media houses and involves kickbacks and bribery in our fishing industry involving massive amounts. Some estimate as much as between 150 million Namibia dollars up to 2.5 billion. And these revelations have shaken the country to the core. It's not that corruption headlines are new in Namibia, but this one is bigger than most. And already several heads have rolled, including those of 2 cabinet ministers and others outside the country. And to paint a slightly broader picture, although we won't have time to discuss this in any depth today, not only does this involve corruption at the highest level, but it also speaks to the importance of good journalism in speaking truth to power and underpinning democracy, and in so doing, winning back public trust. With me today are 2 of the journalists who've been at the center of this expose. Shinovene Imanuel, on my right, who heads the Namibian Investigative Journalism Unit, and Helgi of the Icelandic National Broadcasting Service, who has also done a major documentary on this issue. Let me start out by just sketching a little bit of a background and pose this question to Shino, if I may. Shino started writing stories about this issue, or this issue which led to the bigger story, in 2014 already. Your reports at the time were often generally dismissed as just being anti-government. But now it has planted seeds, and this has turned from a very local news story and corruption here on a smaller scale to this huge global expose. Shino, tell us a bit how that started.
Yeah, I think for us, especially the Namibian, it was mostly, we started getting tidbits and bits of this story around 2013, 2014, but concretely around 2014. And that's when, for instance, the former minister appointed James Atuikulipi on the Fiscal Board. We wrote that. We basically said Esau is appointing a person close to a relative to the Fiscal Board. And after that article, James Atuikulipi, who we questioned why he was being appointed, even threatened to sue us. But we held our ground. In fact, what we did is turning his legal threat into a story saying Atuikulipi threatens to sue, because we believed at the point that was a major red flag. And then few weeks later, we did several reports on the issue of Esau being accused of giving quotas to Fishco. Remember, if you follow the trend, is that Esau appoints his son-in-law's cousin, correct, who is James, on this board, and then all of a sudden starts giving quotas to this board, to this fishing entity. And then we started questioning. We did several reports, and obviously at the time they felt it was an attack to Esau, who apparently was already promoting Namibianization of the fishing sector. But at the point we had concrete evidence that something was not right.
It's not right. Thanks for that, Shino. And then to come to you, Helgi. From there, it suddenly became this major global news story. And your huge documentary and the whistleblower in Iceland coming up and spilling all the beans, implicating everybody. Can you tell us, taking it from where Shino left off, how did this reach you and how did it become the major story it became?
Yeah, thank you. About a year ago, a friend of mine who's actually the current editor of WikiLeaks contacted me and told me that he had some documents that he had gotten and possibly a whistleblower who would like to meet us, and we met him, and that was this man, Jóhannes Stefánsson. And from after that first meeting, we we realized that this sounded like a huge story. We had spoken about the issue before, because the Icelandic interests in Africa in the fishing industry has come up in small news stories over the years, especially regarding the fishing around Mauritania and Morocco, where they have been accused of overfishing and fishing from the Mauritius people, not the Mauritanian people with quota from Morocco and all of that. So, but it's the fishing industry as a whole and generally globally is a really closed up business. There's absolutely no transparency. There's more transparency in a lot of businesses that you would think would be less transparent than the fishing industry, and that of course is because you have companies that are located in tax havens, and then the ships are in another tax haven, and so on, and because it moves around, it's really hard to figure out how it is. So that made this story even more genuine is the fact that we have all of these documents who paint this picture pretty clearly, and also the whistleblower, which is unique.
Absolutely. The other thing is, while I'm chatting to you, Helgi, is someone said, and I forget who it was, the myth of Iceland's innocence is dead. Would you like to speak to that and tell us more particularly what has been the fallout of this in Iceland itself? The implications of what is happening in an African country and taking these fishing quotas and bribing and corrupting. What's been the fallout?
Well, the fallout has obviously been that it has, of course, had a huge impact on the company involved, which is the largest seafood company and fisheries company in Iceland. They have also been in the recent years, and that is of course something that has raised questions in the recent days, is for the last 10 years or so, they have also been investing a lot in they bought some companies in a huge chain of grocery stores. They bought a shipping company, and they have been getting a lot bigger in the recent years, which of course raises questions on where the money came from that they used for that. But yeah, the fallout has of course been that they are their CEO has stepped down. I think that we haven't begun to see the effect that it's going to have on the company. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But regarding politics, it has it has had some effect there, because just yesterday the government proposed a 16-point plan in just to try and recover from this scandal by putting on all kinds of changes in legislation and
to avoid these kinds of situations.
And to make especially the fisheries industry more transparent also. A lot of the things that they are talking about there has been talked about in Iceland for many years. So yeah, although
some good indirectly will come out of this really horrible scandal.
Yeah, I believe so, and the fact about the quote about the Icelandic innocence, I believe that even now Icelanders, after the banking crisis and the Panama Papers and all of that, people aren't walking around with thoughts in their head like of genuine innocence by the Icelanders anymore. But what they thought was kind of still our deal was that we came here to Namibia in 1990 to help with the aid program.
Correct. And
we spent, I think, $10 million here or something. But it was all done to Namibianize the fishing industry. And generally that work was said to have been almost like a miracle. Right. It went really good, and I think we did a lot of good here. But as soon as those guys went, this company came, and although the briberies they are allegedly paid were amounted to the same amount,
Correct.
they, I believe, gained probably tenfold
what they had put in.
what they had put in.
Yes.
And of course, something that we cannot forget is that, you know, this. I think this, setting aside the bribery and the tax evasion and stuff, I think this is just a classic case of state looting, in the sense that you have a fishing quota, a national resource, which is taken by a foreign company.
Correct.
And instead of at least paying for the quota, they
Right.
don't pay. They pay as little as half to the state, and the rest goes into the pocket of these so-called sharks. So I think that's something that when you add it up, I think that's one of the biggest effects that it has on a country like Namibia is if the documents are true, which I believe they are, the money that has been taken out of taken from the state and at the end the Namibian people is incredibly high. The number is incredibly high.
Absolutely. And of course, this is a resource that was meant post-independence to benefit the people, more particularly the have-nots of this country.
Yeah.
Shino, can I turn to you? And obviously the fallout in Iceland we've heard a little about, and there's been significant fallout here with a number of heads rolling, including 2 ministers. And it seems likely this is going to continue. And of course, you right at the forefront of that. Give us a little idea of what you think the impact of the story, or what it has in Namibia. Is it going to change anything also?
I think, like I was talking to Tangeni, our editor, the other time, that I think this is probably one of the biggest stories we have worked on.
Indeed.
I think even the way we have presented it to the readers, we were like so confident, because in the past we were always at the back end of accusation of going after certain people.
Absolutely.
But in this case, I think this gave us more of the evidence, the hardcore evidence of where you have Shangala boasting about, look, let's do this before everyone wakes up, and this is the only chance.
Yeah.
If the minister comes in, or if this minister is removed, it won't be changed.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of hardcore evidence.
Protect the minister.
Yes,
and
yes.
that's
we need
and
to protect the
documentary
minister.
evidence that
Yes.
underpinned.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and that, I think, on top of the stuff they did,
Yes.
where the minister was busted for asking, money, and then he was, approached and asked for, why is he denying it? I think all of that contributed to a much more public that is aware of this is not only visible in documents, it's visible even on the videos.
Absolutely.
So I think, but in terms of, at the moment, okay, of course, 2 ministers resigned. Our role mostly is just to give the public the information. We wouldn't want to be the one having to say, okay, so-and-so should move away from office. I think that should be up to the public to demand if they feel so.
Exactly.
Our job mostly is to say, look, this is wrong, and or we probably feel this is wrong and the government is cheated. But at the end of the day, the public should be the one saying, I think that here heads should roll.
Yep.
In some cases, we will probably go in instances where some people won't be touched. I think that is likely to happen. Because it's a system. I think what even other people who have covered previous stories, this is a system of, we are talking about, we probably shook one of the biggest system in Namibia and abroad in terms of their clique of how they do things. And they are likely to recycle themselves in the next 4 years. What they're going to do is go back, plan, and then get back into the system.
Exactly.
And unless maybe if things, extraordinary things happen where the new the administration or the people on top of the chain of the politics, where they will say, no, we cannot allow A, B, C, and D into the system.
Exactly.
These are shamed individuals who are known publicly to be a disgrace, and they will give a bad example to the people. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Also, it speaks to the power of collaborative journalism and cross-border, makes it easier or less likely that government can deny and block local media because it's gone so big. I think that's... maybe I can quickly ask you, Helgi, because it's a thing, an aspect of this reporting that people have noted. And that was when you guys collared our former Ministry of Fisheries now, Bernhard Eisel, at, ironically speaking, a transparency, or he was due to speak on transparency at a conference in Oslo. And that's where you managed to collar him and get him on the record. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the thing is, we had been trying to get an interview with him for some time. We had offered him to meet him in Berlin, where he was traveling, and at the last minute he told us no, and then we offered to come here and to Namibia and do the interview, and then we got some message that he wouldn't be up for an interview, but we could talk to some lower level guys in the ministry. So having gotten that answer and the second no from him, we decided to go to the along with Al Jazeera. We went to Norway and we met him at this conference where we basically confronted him with the videos of him talking to these so-called Chinese investors who were journalists posing as investors, and they asked him about him there. It was it was a strange thing to do, but I think it in a sense, although it was kind of strange, it showed that a lot of his answers were, of course, pretty I don't know the right word for it, but they were special. To say the least. So it definitely showed, a lot of the things that we have been watching for the last couple of months is we see how in the documents how this company Samherji and people around there talk about what the minister has been doing for the last couple of 6 or 7 years, changing the law, doing this and that, and Samherji always saying that we are involved in changing the law changing that's now been worked on by Saki, and the minister is done most of all for Samherji and stuff.
Correct.
And in the meanwhile, the same minister has been doing speech after speech after speech about the need for Namibianization, the need for creating jobs and such. So that of course was not in sync, to say the least, of what we now know that he was doing.
And what they say and what they do is so dramatically different. In the meantime, the country is being, or certainly its resources are being sold out from under us. Back to you, Shino, on the local front. I don't want you to show your hand, because I'm sure we're going to be able to anticipate a lot more coming out of this, and obviously much of what is going to happen depends on how the authorities are going to be dealing with this issue going forward. We've heard of some things, or you've reported the freezing of certain bank accounts and resignations, of course. What do you think? Where is this going to go from here? And maybe just a second part of the question, because we'll be running out of time. A lot of naysayers have said that this revelation, coming at the time it does, just before Namibia national and presidential elections on the 27th of this month, is kind of timed deliberately. Do you want to maybe, if you can, to speak briefly to those two questions?
Yeah, I think from what we have seen, I think this is probably one of those leaks that we have worked on several leaks, like the Panama Papers, Parada Papers, where you probably feel, okay, we have reached just the end of the road on these kind of stories. But this one, we feel we could probably even go up to March next year of just stories. But it will take time. It will also take a lot of collaborations and just being patient and not, writing so many stories that will tire readers. Otherwise, they will be like, "Ooh, not again."
Yes, exactly.
But we will be looking at these stories over, and I think as they are going, because we suspect is that the system was so rigged that it has been tailored for certain people.
Yes.
Then that includes, I mean, even that in their documentary they spoke of a system that the Icelandic government sponsored to make sure the quota allocation was transparent.
Right.
One thing that the current minister did when he came into power is to get rid of it. So those kind of stories, there should be a lot of things that they changed in the system that we'll have to look at, so that we raise the flag, so that next time, you know, we do have to look, we don't have to go through the same thing again. And because even now, the newspaper has been calling for the cancellation of these so-called fishing quotas. I mean, I don't understand why a fishing quota should go to Fishco, which eventually goes to Icelandic and a few 5 people.
Exactly.
Whereas so they can give this quota to, they can just maybe give it to directly to schools or to the catering company that is giving food to schools, and say, guys, this is the quota for this year. No learner should go starving at all, which then this fish will be distributed to all the schools. So that's what we probably want to advocate, to say this spoon feeding of government or state-owned resources to few companies that are always a clique around the minister. It's not Namibianization, it's privatization of few people. So that's one of it. And to the issue of the timing, you know, we just believe that the story is a story. If a story comes out now that, you know, the president is doing this and it's his birthday tomorrow,
the timing is irrelevant.
It has nothing to do with it. It's mostly what is the issue. Because if we find out even on Monday that 10 people are dying of hunger in a certain region, we're not going to pull back and say we can't report on that because people will see it as elections. Because if anything, we should be able to provide the public with a full picture to say, these are, when you make your decision, you know this. At least you make this decision knowing this. So I think we don't want to make it seem as if people they don't understand that the issue of timing. Some of them will appreciate it, some of them will say, no, this is, but it's up to them. I think at the end of the day, we should give them the choice.
And as we in journalism always say, we always like to think what is actually at the heart of any story. And obviously at the heart of this story is human greed. Whether it's on Namibian soil, whether it's further afield, it is the greed that is denying essentially a country of just less than 3 million people to feed, house, educate, and give healthcare to a majority of those people. And it's stories like this that hopefully one day will make the difference, and that our resources, as you say, Shino, will be more appropriately used to the benefit of the people themselves. Finally, to wrap up, a last comment from either or both of you on any of this. We hear of much anticipated Al Jazeera documentary coming on the 1st of December, so obviously the story isn't going to go away, and I think public interest isn't going to go away, so we look forward to the next chapter. Helgi, last words from you before we close?
Just as you said, there's a lot more to come, because there's definitely, as I understand it, there's a lot brewing in the investigation, both here in Namibia and also in at least 3 other countries. So I think that, although we can't say right now, but I think that in the probably the next couple of weeks we're gonna see something coming out of these investigations. You can speculate on whether the investigation should have been done more quicker and why it didn't go like that. Was it because of the Minister of Justice was who he was, and I think it definitely played a role. But you know, from what we've heard now, all of the relevant authorities, at least here and in the other countries, are at least up to speed now.
Absolutely. And obviously here at home we hope, if nothing else, the authorities will do the right thing for once and for all. Shino, any last remarks from you on that score?
I think if anything, what this investigation, if anything, just cements the need for whistleblowers. We shouldn't be relying on people, not really, but those who go abroad and really risk their lives for a country that they are not from. Not saying that it's wrong, but I think if anything, it provides us, we say, we should be able to trust the media with information. And if you want to be protected, most of the time we do protect sources. So if you are at a high office facilitating all these documents for certain ministers to benefit, and the 80% of the country is suffering, they don't have any access to health, any access to water, and these decisions are being made by to benefit certain 2 to 10 people who are building mansions, and you are just there getting maybe a salary, which is, but generally people should tap into their conscience and say, I'm tapping this document, an agreement that will disadvantage the Namibian government, the Namibian people. How about if I leak it to the Namibians or to...
Because I think, sorry, you know, of course we know there was not such a big clique of people, politicians and the companies that were involved, but there was a lot of people who got wind of at least bits and bits of something that was so definitely wrong that it should have raised alarms.
Exactly, and maybe on that note, it's a good note to end, just to say, you know, you guys are, in speaking truth to power and revealing these kinds of massive corruption and other stories, you know, I didn't ask you the question, but at some point, you know, your lives could also be endangered. You playing here with the rich and the powerful and the corrupt, whose tentacles reach deep across the oceans and across the continent. And I think kudos has to be paid to the journalists who are doing this kind of work. And the public needs to be called upon to really continue to support good journalism, whether it means buying a newspaper or a subscription to a broadcaster, whatever it is. It needs to be supported, because at the end of the day, this is what is keeping our democracy on its toes, whether it's here in Iceland or elsewhere in the world. So I thank you both, Helgi from Iceland and Shino from Namibia. Thank you very much for the discussion. Thank you.
Cheers.